All right. So I want you to ask yourself, what do boundaries actually mean to you and your life? You see, when I think about boundaries, I love to use the analogy that you are the artist and you are defining the canvas at which you will create your masterpiece, which is your life. And just like so many other artists, you have to strategically sketch, draw, or even map out where you plan to place key elements that will shape and create your masterpiece. So, honestly, if you're asking yourself the question whether or not you need boundaries, I can almost guarantee you that 9 times out of 10, the chances are that you do. Boundaries can be guidelines, agreements, intentions. These are things that you use that will guide you to co create the life that you want. Boundaries can also be physical, they can be emotional, they can be psychological. When many people think of boundaries, they often think that they're mean or a cruel tactic that you use to keep people away from you, especially friends and loved ones. But that is completely the opposite. They are there to help you show up in every single area of your life. Boundaries are a way to show yourself love, respect for your time, talent, and energy. So, today, what I wanted to do, I wanted to break down and give you just 3 simple questions that you can ask yourself to identify if you need boundaries in your life. So, hello, hi. I'm Erica Trimnell, and I'm also known as the Mindful Mistress on Instagram. I consult with organizations on trauma informed mindfulness practices, as well as individuals such as yourself. I help them and I coach them, people who feel stuck, who feel limited, both mentally, emotionally, physically, or energetically. I help them get back their childlike passion for life. I believe wholeheartedly that in this life, it's meant to be lived fully and completely. And some of us aren't really tapping in our potential to truly live life. We feel so stuck to obligations, things that we feel like we must do and have to do. And so this is where I come in. I guide people to pick up their purpose and uncover their ability to create their reality, which looks like living authentically, loving intently, and most importantly, moving purposefully. So, today I want to talk about boundaries. Boundaries are an essential self care practice. I would argue that boundaries are your most crucial self care practice that you can implement. You see, without boundaries, you allow others to infringe upon your me time and then also direct your life's path and assign meaning to things in your life that may be incongruent with your beliefs and or values. And without boundaries, you let other people's priorities supersede your own wants and needs. The lack of boundaries can lead to emotional and mental distress, wasted time, relationship issues, and also financial problems and hardship. Have you ever sacrificed your happiness for others and found yourself resenting them or the task that you said that you will do because you agreed to it, right? Well, I've definitely been there. If so, that is because you did not have any boundaries in place. And you know what? It's okay because it happens to a lot of us. I would definitely say, especially nowadays when we're moving at lightning speed and we do not have the proper protocol to check in with ourselves, the proper protocol to create the lives that we want. And in all honesty, it's a lot of work. And I help clients do that. I help clients establish boundaries by honoring themselves, their time, their talent, and their energies by enforcing boundaries. So, ironically enough, Once you know the rules to the game, right? AKA your boundaries, everything becomes simpler, right? It becomes honestly so much easier to do, and your life becomes a lot less complicated when you have boundaries in place, when you have boundaries and you actually enforce them. There's a little caveat to this. So, a few things I'd like you to know when it comes to boundaries is that some people, it's really difficult to enforce boundaries when we're dealing with different family culture dynamics and heritage. So, the truth is that most of us don't even know what boundaries look like and what kind of boundaries we need. And this is especially true if you grew up in a family that lacked boundaries, in which case you may think it's okay to have no opinions of your own or that you can't even say no. And you may not even think that you have the right to ask for respect or for someone to respect your time, your me time, for example. And you might also accept poor treatment from others because you do not know how to ask for what you need and what you want. You see, and this root belief might be if you set a boundary, you're being selfish. And with that comes a lot of action and thought that acts on this root belief. Now, if that's you, it is okay. I want to give you an example. So, some of you guys might know that I'm Nigerian. My dad is from Nigeria, and my dad's from Nigeria, and I'm proud of that. But in the Nigerian culture, it is not accepted for me to place boundaries with elders. Can you imagine me telling my grandma that, no, I'm not going to tend to your needs right now because I need my me time? Yeah. That's definitely not happening. So I want you to know that I understand. For those of you who have family culture issues that really compete or clash with having and establishing boundaries, I get it. I totally get it. So it really depends on your own social and cultural norms whether or not it's easy for you to place boundaries in your life. However, I will say that it is important for you to give yourself the time and the space that you need so you can operate at your best ability and be present for those you love in the moment. And if you're like me, and I totally struggled with creating boundaries and enforcing them, right? Twofold, because it goes against the grain of what we were taught as a child. I am happy to help you. I'm happy to give you some tips and tricks that I use to create boundaries in a life where culture and tradition teaches me that my boundary should be either non-existent or should have porous boundaries. And you can only imagine the internal conflict that one has to deal with when they are up against culture and then trying to define a life for themselves. You see, you have to get to a point where you realize that you matter and you are worthy. And you have to feed yourself before you can feed anyone else. So establishing boundaries is essential. Now, I know we kind of talked about a lot and it might seem a little bit overwhelming, but please know that today I'm going to give you three simple questions to help you identify whether or not you need boundaries. So, going back to childhood, because as you know, with my nonprofit Prism Light, I talk about childhood trauma. I spread awareness of the damage that childhood trauma does, not just to us mentally, physically, emotionally, but it affects our health later on in life. And boundaries are a crucial thing that not only adults need, but also kids as well. I won't get into that today, but I wanted to talk so that even those of us who grew up in a household that didn't have this additional barrier, like I talked about with tradition and culture, To create boundaries, you might have seen your parents or family members have non existent boundaries. These examples might be where you saw your mom or your dad constantly giving of themselves. And maybe when it came to household responsibilities or came to you, they didn't have the time and energy because they were too busy giving of themselves in other areas. Now, these examples might have caused you to create your own ideas of what a boundary is or what a boundary isn't, and also the beliefs that you now use to create the life. And unfortunately, like I've said many times before, the stories we get told when we were younger and some of the examples that we've seen do not have to be what currently rule our life now. Can you think of a time where your parents might have got upset with a family member or friend who enforced their boundaries? I definitely can. And a lot of times, again, it goes back to that clash between various cultures, social norms, where we're not used to seeing people protect their time and their space. Well, now I definitely feel like there's a reckoning. I feel like more people are opening up and enforcing boundaries, and it's time that you do the same. Also, can you think of a time where perhaps your parents or loved ones showed you that boundaries are long periods of silence? Well, that's not exactly a healthy boundary. So you could probably think of even more ways where your parents or loved ones showed you what a boundary is or what a boundary isn't. And now you're using that to create the life that maybe doesn't jive with your morals and values. I believe that boundaries are phenomenal, but they have to be used appropriately. They have to be used, they have to be enforced. And boundaries are a great way for you to express your truth and honor yourself. So let's get into it. The very first question I want you to ask yourself when it comes to whether or not you need boundaries is, what are you tolerating? Ask yourself, what are you currently tolerating? Now, I'm going to give you a moment to check in and examine the areas of your lives, whether it be health, relationships, family, finance. Checking in is so important. It is really the first step. I've given you a few moments. Hopefully, something has come to mind. Is there a specific person, place, thing, or situation that gives you these emotional negative thoughts or reactions? If so, then ask yourself, what can you do to give yourself more space and time to better show up for that situation, for that person, or for that place? Again, I want you to understand that when you give yourself the space and time, you're able to create a proper response and or action to do the things in life that you want to do, and to not just be operating out of your triggers, which we discussed last week, right? That space is so crucial because it's in that space where you actually get to be in the driver's seat of your life. You're no longer allowing your past to rule the current situation. You are taking the reins, you are taking charge because you've given yourself the time to adequately assess the situation. If it's the level 3 situation, you can give it a level 3 response. If it's the level 10, you can give it a level 10 response if you choose to. But you're no longer operating out of what some people might call the monkey brain or out of your trauma response. So, the second question I want you to ask yourself is, what brings joy to your life that you are no longer engaging in? Now, I want you to be incredibly honest with yourself. Nobody else is here. I'm not going to tell your secret. You do not have to send it to me, but be honest. What in your life are you no longer engaging in that feeds your soul? This is a key sign that there's an opportunity for a boundary to be put in place and established here. This is often prevalent in constant cycles of feeling guilt or fear of saying yes to your heart's desires. Often people who don't have healthy boundaries, they feel guilty for even saying yes to the simplest pleasures of life. And by answering the question, what brings joy to your life that you're no longer engaging in, you can begin to craft ways in which you can start to integrate more things in your life that allow you to come alive and tap in to your potential, tap into your innate genius, tap into your gift. So, the last question I want you to ask yourself is I want you to ask yourself, do you see themes in your personal relationships or friendships that they tend to be a tad bit difficult and or dramatic? Well, not having boundaries or setting unhealthy boundaries lets others know that you don't know how to take care of yourself and or that you don't value your time, your talent, your energy, your money, etc. You see where I'm going with this? You're teaching others how to treat you. And that first starts with having boundaries. And also, there's that self care piece, but we'll get to that another time. So, this really leaves you open to attracting people in your life who will see your gifts, who will see your talents, but see that you are not respecting them. And so they'll use them for their own to manifest what they want. And that usually looks like in a form of control, where someone is controlling you. Or worse yet, your unconscious lack of agency or power results in self fulfilling spiral and it begets self manipulation. Now, this is so much so that you begin to lose your sense of self and who you truly are. I've been there and I get it. And to be honest, some of these go back to the examples we had or didn't have growing up. But know that you can change, that you can stop that cycle, that you do not have to continue that. And that all of these things make you a prime target for a codependent relationship or friendship that lacks an equal exchange of that gives and take. So when boundaries are established, they are your guidelines. They are the borders that you create. You are telling specific elements of your life where you want them to go and what you want them to look like. They are a wellness and a self care practice that protects your talent, time, and energy from being taken advantage of and overcommitting, overworking, and feeling overwhelmed. And lastly, the physical and emotional abuse or harm. When we give up the blame and victimhood and transform our lives back into empowerment, we take back control of our lives. We set clear limits. We need to know that saying yes when we really mean yes and no when we really mean no is important not only to ourselves, but the people in our lives. It helps us feel in control and not like a puppet anymore on the end of somebody else's strings. Setting boundaries involves being responsible for our own words, actions, and responses to others. Boundaries also allow us to have our own personal space, our privacy, our own feelings, our own thoughts, our own needs and ideas. They allow us to be ourselves rather than an extension of someone else or become what someone else wants us to be. Well, that is all I have for us today with boundaries. Again, remember they are your essential self care practice. Thank you so much for watching tonight. I'm Erica Trimnell. Join me next week when I talk about the importance of checking in.